Hi, Khyati. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi Bala, how are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thank you. How are things in Singapore?
All good. Just a good warm day today. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's been nice here as well. It's technically spring, but it's I don't know summer, I guess. But yeah, it's beautiful out here as well. So, Khyati, you started working with computers initially, and now you have authored a book. You host a podcast, and you also create cartoons and illustrations. Tell me a little bit about how this transition happened.
Yeah, so I generally introduce myself that I am an IT consultant turned artist. So I see myself as a person who is really an analyst at the base of it, right? Because that's how I always saw myself. And my training is as a computer engineer, and I worked. I mean, I always wanted to be and become an engineer, and I really enjoyed that career as well. So sometimes people say how their parents had pushed them into a career and then they didn't enjoy and then they pivoted. In my case, I feel like I did enjoy studying about coding, and I was finding it fun. Basically, it was like a puzzle that needs to be solved every single time, and so I had a good time. So I was working in this field called the data warehousing and business intelligence. So I was working on technologies like Teradata, Informatica, and basically helping figure out my clients on where their data is located, and how we can pull out that data and basically create their data warehouses, and then we create reports that they will be sent to their client to their business teams for creating some sort of a business report. So this was basically my career for the longest amount of time, and in between there was a break because I became a mom, and I took a little bit of a break during that time. But I came back to work again, started enjoying it. But somewhere in this process, I there were two things happening with me. I was number one, I was burning out, being this full time software engineer in a very competitive company, and also being a mom who had I that was, I felt like a very important project in my life, and I also did not want to let that project be suffering because of something else, right? So I felt like I needed to balance them both, and I was sort of struggling in that. That's where, and I also had other aspirations, because I even when I was a child, I always enjoyed writing, and I also enjoyed learning about the world in general. So I was a good reader. I used to read a lot. But then you don't have that much time when you are working and trying to lead a normal life like how everybody is trying to do. So all of those things were sort of left behind, but at the same time that calling was there, that I need to find that I want to go and explore that. And I felt like it wasn't happening with my the work schedule that I had and stuff like that. And so that struggle was going on for a long amount of time. But this idea of uh, quitting a job was, it's a very difficult thing to do. But one day something happened, and somebody asked me, like, what do you do? And I was so drained, and I just told that person, I just work somewhere. I didn't have any enthusiasm or energy to explain to that person what do I do. It was also partly because by then, I was also starting to feel like every project is the same. You solve this pretty much the same puzzle in every single thing that you do. So I was starting to feel that there was some kind of a unidimensionality to my work, and I was losing that spark that I was feeling for my work, which I had when in my initial years, when the first 5 years, when you want to prove yourself and you want to tell the world that, yes, I am a good software engineer and I can do a good, I mean, I can deliver projects and stuff like that. All of that challenge seemed to be, less interesting after a point. And then, I said, okay, if the spark is not there, and if I'm also suffering in the sense that I'm suffering in terms of my physical health also after a point, right? When you are doing so much more than what you can do. So I was like, okay, I need a break. Maybe I should take a break and I should figure out something. I generally feel that it's a bad advice. I would still think that this, what I did, I would not advise other people to do, especially other women to do. I specifically tell other women that I meet, like, don't do this, because this is a recipe for putting yourself, so it's very easy for women to fall back into going into this homemaker zone and not, so I feel like, don't give yourself a break. You figure out a plan and do something. Unfortunately for me, I was not in that space at that time, so I just went ahead because I needed that break more than anything else. So I just took that break, and then I tried to figure out what else I wanted to do. And actually, what else was also not very clear in my mind. It was a lot of, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of random things, which I think people were questioning at the time, like, why are you doing this, right? And I was like, I'm just trying to learn things, because I I felt like whatever experience I had as an engineer is a very limited experience of life and business and stuff like that. So I wanted to understand the world a bit more. So I was doing very, very random things at that time, and which had no long term, after doing this, what I was going to do, I had no such vision. Okay, that was my problem at that time. But I was finding that vision. It was like I was just discovering. I was giving myself the chance to, let me try this out. If this works out, it's good. If it doesn't work out, there's no harm. And again, this, I speak with some amount of privilege, because I had a partner who was working full time and who was taking care of the finances, so I do not have to worry about when my next meal or the rent is going to come from. So not everybody has this amount of privilege, so I do acknowledge that. Then yeah, basically I spent a lot of time trying out many things. I also went back to corporate world again for a short amount of time, because I felt कि कुछ हो नहीं रहा है, why am I wasting my time? If I'm not doing anything creative, if I'm not making money, I should just go back to doing corporate work. So I did that again, but then again I felt the same call, like, no, this is going to just not work. I have to find out. So when after that third try is where I felt ki I really need to give myself time and permission to not worry about what others are going to say, what others are going to think. I should just, and I should do. And one friend of mine actually gave me, so I was struggling through all of this, and I was talking to a friend, and who I was meeting after a very long time. So he gifted me a book called The One Thing. Okay, I read that book in like half an hour or something like that. The book doesn't matter, but just the thing that, pick one thing and stick with it for some time. I think that kind of stuck in my head, and then I was like, okay, let me find that one thing that I want to, and I should give enough time. I should, because till that point I was trying to balance out too many things. I was trying to make money, trying to do creative work. Both of those things sometimes do not gel well. Okay. So I said, paisa to nahi ban raha hai, so at least focus on the creative part of it and give yourself some time to do it. And if it still doesn't work out after 4-5 years, you still don't know, you can go back to corporate job and do whatever, something. I think I always had that confidence that the day I decide I want to do something, I will find something. So I was never that insecure. I was never in that kind of insecurity. Although although I feel that that's also, like, it's always a thing that you have to keep on questioning whether you are really upgrading your skills, and are you really staying relevant in the market or not, right? That question is always there. But yeah, so I then somewhere in all of this is when I started writing. Actually, I came to illustration pretty much by chance, because I had written a very short and silly children's book. Okay, and my daughter was about 3 years at that time, and I had written a book that she would like to read. So, and I said, I want to get this book illustrated. So I went around trying to find an illustrator for the book. And I found somebody who had actually illustrated a book. And I told her, do you want to illustrate this book? And she said, and actually I was doing certain other creative work at that time. So she knew that I was doing some creative work. So she said that, why don't you try illustrating it? Because there's no one way of illustrating things. There are like many different ways you can experiment, and maybe you will find something interesting. So that nudged me into trying this out. I started illustrating that little book, and then a friend suggested that you should try the digital medium rather than trying it on paper, because I'm certainly not that good an artist. So, because I had not drawn since I was in school. I used to draw when I was in school. And I was decent at drawing, but I was certainly not the kind of artist who can draw very real life things and stuff like that. So when I had to illustrate book, I had to kind of figure out a style that I was able to work with, and then I had to. So basically, in the process of illustrating that book is where I found that it kind of somewhere in the process is when I got this light bulb moment that, oh, this can work, and I can probably see things in this kind of a way also. It sort of changed the way I was thinking about things and looking at things, right? And from there onwards, I started exploring cartoons, and then once that happened, that time also I was not actually doing a lot of serious kind of cartoons. I was creating cartoons about introversion and things like that, which is very light, funny, not super funny also, but like kind of relatable sort of humor. And when I started doing that, that's where I figured that I can actually this kind of a media is something that I can work with, where the writing and the visual part of it can come together. So yeah, so I think that really this discovery took a lot of time for me, to be honest.
Yeah, a lot of people in their mid 30s, early 40s, the so-called middle age, do face this burnout situation. And I think part of the reason is because, in their early 20s, maybe when they're working on their first job, there is so much of a learning curve. They are
Yeah.
always excited about the new project. They are working on things that they have never worked on in school and college. And suddenly everything starts to become muscle memory, and then you're just hopping from one project to the other. And I know the technology is changing extremely fast and there is so much to learn all the time, but I feel like that's where the whole plateauing happens, and then everyone wants to just move on to something that they love, which they always did in their 20s. But this whole rat race of just work and provide for your family and whatever, right? So that takes on. You mentioned to me that you quit your work briefly and then came back again, and you were not worried about if you would fall behind. What kind of gave you that confidence? And this is something that a lot of people struggle with as well, that if I quit and come back 6 months later, is the scenario going to be entirely different? Am I going to fall
I would say
behind?
6 months, nothing is gonna change. That would I came back after I had dropped. Actually, people don't quit their job when they are on maternity leave, because why would you? You are getting that benefit. But I think at that point, for me it was just more. I don't know. I think I'm an emotional person in that sense. Like like chahiye break, so I took it. But I think nothing changes in a year, so you can always come back. And I think that confidence, I think maybe it just comes from the fact that I was always okay with learning new technologies and stuff. Like even when I was I had changed many, like one after the other. So I know, like, things change, but the fundamentals don't change, right? Like just the names change, but the basic structures are all the same. So I didn't find it that difficult. In fact, the first time when I was coming back, I did not find it at all difficult to come back. I think second time, I won't say that I really made an effort to go for any of the IT companies at all, because I was sick of it by that time. So I didn't even try there. I was looking at some other companies where I could probably do a more business centric, something which is more towards the business side of things, and connecting technology with business is where I was trying to find things. But I think I really feel like all of that is things that people learn on the job. And every time you every time you change a job, or if you change the organization, there is some learning curve that everybody's going to face. And I think that's really like something you just have to work through, but nothing that is cannot be overcome. And I feel that most HR and managers do understand that, right? Because that's why you see so many people hopping from one domain to another, and it doesn't harm at all. So yeah. But I think that also comes with having some amount of savings, maybe, because I had saved up a little bit by then. So I knew that if need be, my family needs me to go back to work, I would still have some buffer to work with. So I think that little bit of have saving money in your 20s is also a good idea, I would say.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So from illustrations, I know you were extremely interested in Takshashila institution. How did you come across a think tank like Takshashila, and what were some of your learnings through your time at Takshashila?
Yeah, so I just came across Takshashila because of Pulyabazi. I was a listener of Pulyabazi, and I used to, that was about 2019, 2020 time, when I was drawing also by then, and I was writing about social, political topics and stuff like that. And I was listening to certain interesting podcasts. So I was listening to Pranay and Saurabh talk about these interesting things on policy and all. And I had this thing in my mind that I want to do a master's in some social sciences, right? At some point. But then I was thinking, like, do you really need to do that? Like, if you want to learn, do you really need to go to college and do it? Or now the world is so open, you can learn things by yourself, right? So I said, but then I feel there is some value in going to a place who's going to give you some structure. Because if you just learn things, and I think I was learning a lot about social sciences through my readings. I was reading a lot of history, I was reading a lot of current affairs and things like that, right? But then you are really forming your structures in your head by yourself. And when I was listening to William Bassi, I felt that maybe there is something to gain from learning this discipline a little bit more in a structured manner. So that's where I looked up about Takshashila Institution, and I found that they have a course, and I said, okay, I think by that time it was pandemic. So I said, everybody's taking some course. I might as well take one and make use of my times on Saturday, Sunday. And I think more importantly, I wanted to not be inaccurate in the kind of content I was making, because I was making some social commentary, but I sometimes question what other people are also writing, but I also question myself sometimes, like, is this correct? Is this the right way to think about things or not? And I mean, you form some judgment based on, that you're not totally wrong or something, but you feel like maybe something is missing, so I think I felt that gap could be filled by going and learning the basics of the discipline, understanding the basics of social sciences, economics, political science, and stuff like that, right? So that's how I became a student. I was just an online student, and then I enjoyed doing the course, because you also meet very interesting set of people in the course of the program, and there are a lot of exercises. So I in fact, it helped me as well, because in the sense that as a cartoonist or as a creative worker, I was pretty much working alone by myself without any team. And but by that time I was already reaching out to some people. So I had started to understand that it is important to go out in the world and connect with other people and find out different points of view, and because that's what you will come back and then you will put in your artwork, right? Nothing's going to come from inside. Like, you have to see the world, and if you are going to be in your desk and not seeing the world, then you are missing out that. So I think that's where I think all of those interactions helped a lot. And by the end of it, it just happened that I felt like, okay, let me make a cartoon about this, So I made this 10 panel comic trying to explain whatever I had learned during the program. And there was no rhyme and reason. Like I had no such anything in my mind. I was like, okay, let me share this with the faculty members. That's how I just sent it to them, and they really liked the cartoons that I had created, and they felt that this is an interesting medium that we can use to simplify the concepts that we are learning, and maybe creating a sort of material that can be accessible for a wide variety of people, like from young audience to people who are elderly. I mean, it is just the age group is like very wide. So we thought that let us try to do something like that. So it really happened very organically.
That's awesome. So, you were a part of the Takshashila institution as a student. What got you interested in public policy? Because I know that you were talking about dabbling with a lot of things during your break time, but why public policy? Is that something specific that was always there? Were you interested in what's going around when you were growing up? Yeah.
I think I was always interested in politics in that sense, like trying to understand the politics and socio-economic, like just trying to understand the world around us, right? And I think it was always there. But I mean, I would say that while I was growing up, I didn't have any role models around me who had done anything in that line, because I met, it sounded a couple of people in my family who were engineers. They became my role models and I went in that direction. So if there were any reporters in my family, had there been any reporters or historians or something like that in my family, I would have probably gone in that direction, possible, right? So that kida was always there.
Yeah.
But then what to do with it is, I mean, I'm just a person, like I don't understand these things that kind of a level is how I used to always see myself. Like, okay, you can, but then when you start really reading up and writing, and then I started from the cartoon, right, where everybody was actually also making different kinds of cartoons, and then that's where I felt like, okay, it's okay to put your point of view out. Like, you don't have to worry so much about. That you don't need to know the whole world. It's okay, but you may have a point of view, and it's okay to put that point of view out, and some people may find it interesting. And so that's where I felt that, okay, maybe maybe I should learn a little bit more about this and form better opinions about this, and then write about it is how I went about it. Yeah.
It's actually funny. I have interviewed all the hosts of Puliyabazi with this one as well. So I reached out to Pranay to talk about semiconductors, and on a completely different note, I came across Ati Motors, and I was reaching out to a bunch of people, and Saurabh agreed to do an episode with me, and then I realized that he actually co-hosts Puliyabazi. So that was a very, very I would say cute coincidence.
Wow.
And then now we are talking. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
Life
so
is a
nice.
full circle now. But well, so you guys, when you started writing the book, I think the aim was always to make the basic principles of public policy and economics easy to understand. So was there a gap that you were trying to address? Did you see something being taught and communicated wrong that needed to be addressed?
What we felt was that public policy, when you talk about like what is public policy, if I went and told my family members that I'm doing a program, I'm trying to learn about public policy, most of the time people have no idea what you're talking about. They do not understand the word public policy. Kya hai ye? They just don't know. So so that's where it seemed like this whole discipline of public policy, there's a lot of things being written about it, and there are so many books about it, but then they are seen to be limited to be a certain academic audience, and supposed to be only discussed um, by an elite group of people, and like most people will have no idea about what this discussion is about, right? And people would just generally just check out, right? And especially like uh, even if you think about how we look at the way civics and economics are taught in school, right? Most people just go through it because we have to go through it. We just somehow mug up the definitions. And I don't think, I mean, I feel actually I had a very good teacher in social sciences. So my social sciences teacher was very, very good. Although, but if I remember the textbooks and stuff like that, they were so boring. Like the teacher was somehow making it interesting for us, because he actually was a teacher who was bringing in books which were outside of the syllabus. He would have certain encyclopedias that would he would bring to the class. I remember for the first time that he brought a map to our class, okay? And this was the first time that most children in our class had seen a big, in fact including me, I had seen a proper map in the classroom. This was in 8th standard, okay? When I told this to my daughter, she was like, "What, mama? In 8th standard? Like, we have it in first standard, second standard. We have seen a big map. They don't. It's just so natural for them." And we were so material was very, very limited. I think things may have changed now, even in India, but at least when we were studying, things were like that, right? And even with a teacher who was very good teacher, right? I remember that he himself probably didn't enjoy economics that much, so he would go into much more depths of history and geography, but economics was something he would just pass through in 1 or 2 lectures. So we would just write down, I mean, learn something and write down. I think nobody made the effort to tell us that this all connects to what we see around us, right? That connection of what we are teaching in the book and how do we see it playing around our world. Because economics is in a sense a description of the world, in that sense, right? Like all these laws and all, they are not coming from this kind of a physics kind of a law, right? They are derived from what people have observed and how the world behaves. It's really a study of how the world and people interact and behaves, right? But I think that kind of connection is never made when we are learning about economics and civics, and that just puts us off. Like it just shuts off most people from getting interested in this topic in a more serious way, right? Like, so everybody wants to talk politics, but then everybody's limited to talking politics in very, very basic kind of sense, that we all will talk about corruption, we'll all talk about certain things, or everybody will have their own set of things that they will get riled up about. But then we don't really know in that sense that, okay, where are the answers? Like, what should we be expecting? Like, for example, something like, and then this is probably true for me also. I remember in 7th, maybe we had this India is a democratic republic, right? I think I never understood the meaning of the word republic for a very long time, right? And I think one of the kids must have asked also, and teacher explained something, but it never connected, it never fit into our brain. So you just remember all of these different adjectives that were there, and then just close it over there, right? So I think that's where we felt that we needed to bring that connect and make it simple in a way that anybody who is going to be interested in studying about this would understand something out of it, right? So even if it's somebody like a 12-year-old should be able to understand. I mean, of course, I understand that a 12-year-old will not grasp the complete the gravity of the book at the same level that a 30-year-old would, because the 30-year-old would see all the layers. Maybe a 12-year-old will not see all the layers, but the 12-year-old will still be able to take away certain basic things on which then they can build up their understanding of the world. So we felt that maybe we can create that kind of a beginner's starting point kind of a book.
Yeah, I think in India, at least from growing up, I know things are changing with Takshashila and other think tanks in the picture, but there was a problem with you know dividing or keeping public policy and politics separate. I think we at least when I was growing up did not understand the difference between politics and public policy and governance. Like, we didn't know there was a thing called governance,
Yeah.
even though it was all in our heads, but we would sometimes link all of that to politics. Do you think that's still the case? Like, people don't understand the difference between politics and public policy?
Sort of, and I think it's all connected, so it's okay to sometimes confuse them, right? But then people forget that policies sometimes are going above and beyond one government to another government, right? The government can change, but the policies can remain the same, or the same government can change policies. And so yeah, I mean, I think that's a very uh, certain things are difficult to really demarcate and separate out until you really think about them and you understand it to a certain level, and then you can make out the difference between, oh, this is different versus this is different, right? So yeah, and politics also, we use the word such a loose manner, right? Like, when we talk about politics, generally we say like politics is a bad thing because office politics also, right? Like, but then politics is also the whole art of, and I'm repeating this word a little more recently, but I feel that we keep on forgetting that we always nowadays we see politics as a polarizing thing, but the whole point of politics is to create some kind of a consensus, right? Because if a society has to run in a certain way, you have to bring people all together and then create something that everybody's going to be on board with, and you have to move forward, right? So creating that consensus is also the part of politics, and everybody who's say, I mean, all the different voices being there and then addressing them, all of those is also part of politics. It's just that now I think we are sort of just looking at it in a very narrow way, right? Only yesterday I was actually looking at a very old video clip of Doordarshan, where there was this one old reporter who was she was young at the time, but yeah, this is, one reporter was talking to a host of politicians, including E.B. Vajpayee, and Sachin Pilot was there, and a few more. Like, there were 7, 8 politicians all, and they were all. I think there was some election results that they were discussing at the time, and they were all speaking in such a way that I felt like, okay, this politics was so different back in those days also. It was just very, very different to see so many politicians of so many different parties sitting together and talking very respectfully and having a proper conversation, and not side skirting topics, but actually even addressing them, but then putting their point of view and then stopping it there, and not like making it into some kind of a mudslinging thing that we see sometimes.
Yeah, even I do look at how things were back in the 90s, and there was also a clip that kind of went viral about kids in the 1960s talking about how they see the future and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that top 0.1% privileged people who were talking about it, because India was so different then. So yeah, I mean, it's incredible how things have evolved. I don't know for the good or the bad, but that remains to be seen. So, and also your point about politics, right? Sometimes we run away from politics by saying that, hey, it's bad and all of that. But when you think about it deep inside, we are all politicians at the end of the day. Like, we have politics in the family, and we always manipulate people. Like, we are manipulated and we manipulate people. So I feel like it's part of everyday life in one form or the other. So Khyati, you mentioned about how wide an audience the book tries to cater to. So if I'm someone who wants to know about public policy in India or economics or governance, can this replace a civics textbook? Can this be called a 101 on civics in India?
I won't say that it will replace a textbook, but I would say it can be a good addendum to the textbook, right? Because I honestly haven't read the textbooks recently, so I can't say if I can. Of course, we cannot replace them. I think they also are important in that sense, but maybe it can be a good addition to something like that. That's what recently a couple of people also told me, that they would be finding it interesting if they were taught civics in this manner. We have heard that feedback a lot, so I feel that is quite. I feel very satisfied when I hear that. At the same time, one of the things that I was worried about is that when I am trying to simplify things, I did not want to go to the level where you oversimplify things and start to make it inaccurate. So that line you have to find by your through constant reviewing. And luckily we got good feedback from 2 or 3 economics professors who have written to us, and they have said that they like the book. And one professor in fact even sent out a few changes in terms of some language here and there. But I was actually very happy that if that is all he was able to point out to, I was quite satisfied. Okay, it's okay. Yeah, I replied to him saying that I would look at this and I would edit some of those things. But I was very satisfied that, if an econ prof is saying, okay, this is okay, then I was like, yes, I mean, we have we found the balance in the sense that we were not inaccurate, but we were also able to simplify till the level that it is not oversimplified.
Yeah. Have you found that economics is probably the hardest thing to communicate, or the hardest thing to probably educate someone? And have you thought about why that is the case? Because I've always found it difficult to understand, even though, over time my attitude and my understanding of economics has changed, and now I think of it as another form of behavioral science, in a sense.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends, because I feel like economics has like probably a lot more rigor that is required. I mean, especially if you talk about professional economists, the way they study things and like that, right? So in that sense, it's maybe different. But I think to understand the basics of what every economist will agree on, certain set of things, those things are probably not that much counterintuitive, and actually you can kind of sort of understand them very easily, is what I feel. But then all of these things, when you actually go into the details of the topic and you go further down, there's so many things that one can learn and find out. So I mean, I haven't really reached that stage where I have learned economics till that level, or so I can't really comment. But my job was to understand it enough, in a sense that to understand the basic principles of, okay, why do the price work? A lot of people actually question that, right? Price, they feel that the price works because, and this is a lot this we have tried to illustrate in the book as well, and I think other economists have also spoken in the similar way, that price is sort of a signal in a very distributed kind of a way, not a signal that one person is relaying from the top, but it's a signal that is kind of bubbling up from the interactions that we have, right? And you see that playing very easily if you are trying to find rent in a very area where there is a lot of scarcity, and you are trying to get a rented house. You will see why the rents go high and people are ready to pay more, because people forget that when the prices are so high, they are charging because somebody is ready to pay, and there is a scarcity, and because of that is happening. So I feel like some of those things are easy to understand, but then there are also many counterintuitive things, and sometimes we may connect things in the wrong way, and so all of those errors are possible. If you just take very simple examples and then try applying it everywhere, then there is a chance of you going wrong as well. So I feel like economics is one field where I feel like it needs definitely a lot more studying and rigor before one starts going there. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were authoring the book, did you think about how simple the book needs to be? I mean, obviously, you were looking to break down public policy as basic principles, right? But sometimes we run into the risk of oversimplifying things, and that makes the book longer. But I see that you have come up with the right size. You have come up with easily digestible content. So was there ever a discussion of seeing the risk of oversimplifying things?
So I think, yeah, that risk was there, and that was the discussion, right? So when I was authoring this, right? So I had Pranay and Anupam who were actually giving me most of the material in terms of, okay, this is so a lot of the examples. So the reason I was able to build the reason this book is the format that it is, because it is really a combination of the three of us, right? So, and a lot of the examples that I have used, I knew that they will work because they have already used those examples in their teachings, and they were already so when a teacher is actually teaching, right, he or she is actually constantly evaluating whether that worked or not, and they change it with every batch that they learn that they are teaching. So I think that kind of a trigger had happened with both of them, so they already knew the examples which work, the examples that which don't work, and they were able to sometimes point out to me and tell me, this example you are taking, but people may misinterpret it or confuse it with something else, so you rather not take this but you use this. So I think that experience helped, because their teaching experience helped us engaging what is the general level of understanding that people seem to have, what misconceptions that they have. So then we should bust that misconception also. So all of those feedback, I think they had gathered over a period of their teaching career, and I think that is what came useful as their feedback into the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, highly recommend We the Citizens, Understanding the Indian Republic, co-authored by Khyati, Anupam, and Pranay. It's available on Amazon and almost on all the other important platforms in India and around the world. Khyati, now I want to pivot a little bit to your career as an illustrator and a cartoonist. So you mentioned to me that you were thinking about whether to go paper or digital, and you chose digital because that is something that you were more comfortable with. And now we are in the time of AI, DALI, all of that. How do you see that landscape changing? Is it becoming more challenging for creators? I mean, my take on this is creators will always find their way out, but how has it impacted your work?
Very interestingly, I mean, I think I'm speaking from my opinion and my experience with trying out AI and stuff like that. So there are two parts of it. One is like creators using AI and also creating things, and a lot more people using AI and creating things, and how that is going to go. And there is a separate thread to it about the whole copyright aspects of, that a lot of artists' work has gone into training these models, and they are not getting the due recognition or the remuneration that they should be receiving, right? So that's a different aspect, right? I think in that I definitely see that a lot of artists feeling this sense that my work may get plagiarized like this, it gets trained over, because there were a couple of artists who are who are very popular and famous artists. There's one lady, Sarah Scribbles, one cartoonist who's really at the forefront of challenging these, that whether you can use my style and create artwork on that sense. So I feel like I feel that the legislation is still evolving on that, But I think somewhere down the line, they will have to acknowledge that, at least for living artists, or or artists who's, because if you are putting in a prompt saying that I want to create this artwork in the style of this person, you are in a way acknowledging you are taking something from that person. And if we don't give that recognition to that person, in a way, we would be removing their incentive of creating original artwork, right? So I think that negotiation is still to happen, but it's evolving, and I feel it should go towards a little bit more towards artists, because right now the artists are just being uh, used and not being acknowledged enough, is the thing. At the same time, I think a lot of artists are also using AI and starting to create different kinds of artwork. um, I have really not found it to be 10x or any such thing for my own work. uh, and some people, even for writing, some people have said that they are really able to use AI in a way, and they are no longer writing any emails by themselves, and they are just writing everything by AI. I don't. I'm not that. I have not found it to be that useful. I do look up and find out things from AI sometimes, but I am not able. I just find it very, like, I find the reason, and I think that has to do with why you are writing. If you're going to write a technical document where all you need to do is to communicate these five things that are in your brain and communicate to your team, and then maybe you just write it down and ask AI to word it in a nice way. Probably that's just being more productive. But if you are trying to be there are people who write because they use the writing medium as a way to express themselves, right? So writing is not the output, writing is the process of writing, right? What comes out is not important, but what you go through as a writer while writing that is important, and it has inherent value in doing that. I feel like for me, when I'm if I ever and I don't know, maybe my point of view may change after a few years, so I'm keeping that window open. But at least right now I haven't found that kind of a change. I don't feel happy if I've taken that and I've reworded it. Then I would not read at it and feel at it, look at it and feel like it is mine. It would be, how is it any different from a Google search result, right? So it won't have my voice. Even if it had my voice, I don't know. Like, there are people who told me that they are trying to uh, train some model and make it to write like themselves. uh, Maybe it works for them, and good if it works for them. It hasn't worked. I mean, I do not see myself doing it at this moment, because I find joy in writing. I like the fact that I don't know what I'm going to write about. I like the whole discovery that happens when I meander and I find something, right? Like, I feel like when you give that away to an AI, you are losing the opportunity to look at something from a fresh lens, right? You are wearing the lens that AI has, and then you are writing, as opposed to being somebody who writes from your own lens, and maybe then you want to use AI and tweak it and change it. But yeah, I'm like, fine, grammatical error करने के लिए करना है तो कर लो type का.
Yeah, yeah. I think what AI has done is for someone who has a part-time YouTube channel or a small website that is selling products on Etsy or something, then the bar has gotten lower, meaning they can still get something done with a $20 subscription for their website or for their product. Earlier they had to go out looking for an illustrator and all of that. But I feel like the top 1% will still find their way out because their content is so much or far superior than any AI can generate.
Yeah, and Sorry, can you repeat that last point that you were trying to say? Because I was thinking in some direction and I lost my thought.
No, I was saying that the whole bar has lowered, so anybody can get started very quickly for their product or for
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
website. Uh, but the second part was that the top 1% will always find a way out, because their content and creativity and innovation
Yeah.
is going to be far higher than
I
an
think
AI.
if you are using writing, anything writing as a tool, as a part of the main, all of your other creative work, then to just use that something, some tool to get that thing done, like in a very, like how you would write a text specification for something like that, right? Like, so I think if it's just a something that you have to get done for you to achieve your bigger goal, then yes, it's more like a tool that you're using, and you get on with it, right? But even in terms of illustrations, right? Like sometimes, um but how is it really different from so many of these Photoshop images that we already had available, right? If you had any of these libraries subscribed to, you already have like a very good this thing, and sometimes you feel, I mean, I try to find, okay, if I can make an AI image, versus sometimes I find an image which is already existing in the gallery or something. And sometimes I find that is a better, like sometimes I'm not, if I have, whenever I have a vision which is very fuzzy, I can use AI images because it's around somewhere where I want to go. But whenever I have a vision which is very pointed, like this is what I want in a photo, I want like two people drinking tea with this kind of a teapot, you won't get that. That's what I have experienced, and maybe I'm not good enough at using AI, but I have experienced that when I have a very specific vision that I want this vibe or this exact kind of a thing, it doesn't satisfy me. While if I have like a more generalized vision of, okay, make up this fuzzy art about justice, then it's gonna throw something which has like a something for balance and in some arty thing, and then that abstract image will work. So you use that. If it's just a kind of an additional embellishment in your writing, but it's not really the main meat of the writing, so it doesn't matter, and you just use it.
Yeah, when I started this podcast, I had the most basic logo, and then I thought I'll use AI for my logo, and I gave it some prompts, and it wasn't good at all. I spoke about what the podcast stands for and what kind of logo that I wanted. Two people drinking coffee over a table, and all of that. But the I think the final product was okay. The one that you all see on Spotify, Apple, etc. That is AI generated, but it's still not there. And I heard this from one of my friends who saw the change in logo, and he was like, "Oh, good artwork." And then I said, "It's AI." And then he looked at it closely, and then he said, now that I look at it closely, yeah, it does look AI generated. So
Yeah.
it still cannot do all the nuances quite well, but who knows? This is the worst it can get, so it can only get better. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that you mentioned about giving credit to all the artists who have helped generate that data set, right? I was having this discussion with ex VP of Twitter, Rafi Krikorian, and we were discussing about the same topic. And then the very next day, I mentioned about this episode to someone, and they said, "Have you thanked all the teachers that ever taught you, or have you thanked everybody that you have ever learned from?" And
Oh,
I did
but
not
they were
have.
at least, yeah, they were at least paid while they were teaching you.
I know. Yeah, yeah. The person probably never didn't say teacher, but like ever thanked everyone that you learned from, or something like that. So yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Like someone you meet on a train suggests something, and that completely
Yeah,
changes your life.
so
And
yeah, no, so I feel like, especially, yeah, there's a gray line there, But then if you are saying, oh, I want a teacher who teaches like Mr. This I used to learn from, then you are acknowledging that he was special and he did something more than others. So
Right, right.
then, yeah. So
I
if you
think,
said draw
yeah,
like Picasso, then maybe you do see
right,
some value in that. So
right. I think this holds true uh, for cartoons and illustrations and drawings, but in general, just writing, right? Someone has gone to I don't know, remote UP to create some statistical data, and that is now being used elsewhere. So what about all the hard work and all of that? So it's such a,
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
what an interesting
yeah. I
debate
mean,
there.
yeah, there is a yeah. I mean, there is not everything that we put out in the world can always be monetized, and I don't think everybody is chasing that kind of
Yeah.
a thing also, right? Because a lot of us are just putting out our work and then let people use or do whatever they want to do with it, and that's true of a lot of many open source projects which are there, and people who are putting together data or data banks which are open and accessible for everyone, things like that, right? So that is true. But then it's also true that if there is no value in creating the content, then why would anybody put in that effort in creating that content, right? And this is again, most of the time artists are creating things for themselves, right? Like most people who create artwork may not call themselves artists, right? But they are still making art at home because they enjoy the process of making art. So most people will still go ahead and make the things that they like to make because they like making those things. So yeah, I mean, I think, and I feel like the best pieces always come out from the places where people write or draw or make things without the monetary thing in mind, because that's always dicey for
Yeah.
everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but I think that at the end of the day, maybe there also needs to be an acknowledgement of the work that somebody has done, especially if that work is being used without their consent. Or there should be a way for them to opt out that my work will not be used in training, right? Because the moment, I mean, that consent is required, right? And the moment you do that, most people will say no, you pay me and then you take my work, right? Because that's fair. If yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise it will become like one particular music director in South India who wants to get paid for every single song that he ever created being sung at every single music festival ever.
Oh.
So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that becomes
No, no.
extremely tough. I mean,
Yeah.
even people are
Fair
scared to
use is a thing, right? Fair use
right,
is a thing. So
right.
fair use can be done, but yeah.
People are scared to even cover the songs, even sing it on Instagram live and all of that. That makes it a little
Oh.
difficult.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a different level of yeah, anything that you take to the extremes
Yeah.
is going to have problem. There should be there I think there is always an answer lies in the middle. And
Yeah.
that middle is always a little fuzzy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the beauty of it, right? Like you have a law and then something happens, then you amend the law, you change it, it evolves over time. I think that's the beauty of democracy,
Yeah.
or the country that we live in. Well, Khyati, thank you so much for the time. But before we end this podcast, I would love some books or paper recommendations for further reading, and that can probably serve as an addendum to We the Citizens. So,
Okay, this is not an addendum to We the Citizens. I'm just suggesting, recommending a book that I am reading right now. Uh, this book called Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. She's I think, an Iranian, a person of Iranian origin, and she has written a story of her childhood in Iran. And it's a graphic novel, but I'm still like 25% into the book, and I'm already finding it so amazing. Like it's a very heavy topic of revolution in Iran, and but it is seen through the lens of a child. So a child is living through the times and she's telling the story, and it's dealt with so much innocence and lightness. and while not shying away from everything that was happening at the time. So I feel like it's a very beautiful book. So that's one of my recommendation if anybody wants to read it. And then my second recommendation, an addendum to We the Citizens, would be, I think, Pranay's book, Missing in Action, because there is some overlap. But if somebody enjoys We the Citizen and they want to read a lot more about these topics while still keeping it in light and accessible in that sense, is, I think, Missing in Action. And a third recommendation that I want to give is another comic book which I really love. It's called The Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chai. Okay, I'll send you the link so you can include it in the notes.
Sure, notes, yeah.
So basically, it is by one Singaporean artist who has created a fictional account of. He has created an account of a life of a fictional cartoonist. So I actually read through the whole book thinking that it's probably a character from Singapore history, but it was a fictional character. But he really recreated how a fictional cartoonist's life, from his artwork in his childhood to the comic strips that fictional cartoonist is making back in the days till he's growing old, and what is his portraits today. So very, very interesting way of storytelling. So if people are interested in figuring out different kinds of storytelling methods, then this is an interesting experiment that one should definitely read.
Oh. Well, Khyati, thank you so much for your time and for giving insights on life as first a computer engineer, then as an illustrator, and also now an author. And I'm pretty sure the audience is really looking forward to reading the book We the Citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bala. It was lovely chatting up with you.